Welcome to Exclusive Books Melrose Arch. It's lovely to see everyone sitting here drinking wine. I think it's the first time I've seen this in about, I don't know, 18 months. Anyway, Welcome, everybody. It's so great to be in a bookshop having a real live book launch. Although I must just tell you that this is not a book launch. This is a book wedding. Lynn she's fabulous. She's absolutely fabulous, and she always gets what she wants. So I drew the line at the flowers, okay. So, and apparently I'm the matron of honor. So there we go. Thank you, Simon, you and your team, Jose, for putting this all together. We really appreciate it. I know we've been in and out here with all this equipment and sound, and thank you very much for hosting us. We're just so delighted to be here. So let me get into it. I don't want to take up time here tonight. So for those of you that don't know Lynn, she was actually born in London and raised on 4 different continents. She has written and produced a vast array of storytelling projects for radio, stage, and TV. She founded her company, Creatrix, which is an integrated branded content agency using storytelling techniques to create behavior change. She's performed, believe it or not, in a variety of self-penned cabarets, and she's published a children's book, The Tale of Stingray Charles. Lynn also produced and presented a 13-part jazz series, Bejazzled, which flighted across Africa. Her short fiction has been published in Short Sharp Stories, Instant Exposure, 36 Hours, and Source Magazine. She graduated with an MA cum laude in creative writing at the University of the Witwatersrand, School of Literature, Language, and Media in 2017, and the book, The Gospel According to Wanda B Lazarus, is her debut novel. Well done, Lynn, and congratulations. Yay. With us tonight, we have esteemed and well-known and very,
sexy. Shut up.
Fans in the audience.
Book reviewer, movie reviewer, journalist, Sean Duvall. He was at the Mail and Guardian as their books editor and the chief film critic for 15 years. He's published 2 fiction and 2 non-fiction titles. The fiction titles were Exposure, Queer Fiction, and then all by his lonesome own-some, he produced Not the Movie of the Week, Frightening Flops, and Fabulous Flicks. 25 years of the Mail and Guardian. So well done to Sean for that. He co-edited Pride, Protest and Celebration, as well as To Have and to Hold, the Making of Same-Sex Marriage in South Africa. He's presently a columnist for the Daily Maverick and the book's editor of Arts 24. Sean has read the book. He's interviewed Lynn. He knows the book. So I'm very excited about this discussion this evening that obviously, as you know, we are live streaming direct to YouTube. So you can always go back and revisit it after this evening. So, with no further ado, I hand over to Sean Duvall.
Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Okay, so that's all the introductions. What we're going to do is this. Lynn is going to read 2 short, I say specified short, passages from the Gospel according to Wanda B Lazarus. And before she does each one, well, I'll just say that the book, I'll just give you the context. For various reasons that you'll discover when you read the early chapters of the book, Wanda B Lazarus is projected through time, across the centuries, and sort of with short stops in a sort of mythical realm called the Pleroma. She sort of touches down in different eras, hundreds of years apart, as she moves through time, right? And at each moment, she sort of plays a particular role in the development of history. So with each of the pieces that you're going to read, and will just tell us beforehand where we are, B, C, A, D, etc. And once she's read those, I have got a short list of terms, themes, things that just struck me as things that would be nice to talk about. And I'm going to sort of throw those out at Lynn, who is a jazz musician, so she should be able to improvise. And she will address those particular themes as I raise them. So first of all, reading 1.
Thank you so much, Sean. So extract one, Sean and I don't know each other from about 25 years ago. We were in Jamison's together, sort of separately together. And part of, I just have to preface it by saying, a lot of what is in the book comes from my life experience, but has actually been, in a sense, transformed through my imagination into fiction. So much of what has happened in the book has happened to me, but names have been changed to protect the guilty. So I thought that it would be interesting, especially that it is Sean and a couple of my friends out there who know my intimate history. You don't have to know me to know my intimate history. There's a scene in what I call Book 3, which happens on the... God, I've lost my place. It happens in Mochau, which is the Silk Route, which happens in about 1054 CE, which I placed there because it was a very big stellar event that happened at the time that she was sent back. And she was sent to look for the kumuz. So in each chapter, there's a musical instrument that she's tasked by the muses to retrieve. And any of you who have ever been in a club before might recognize these characters, but as I say, their names have been changed. So she arrives through the Singing Sands to Crescent Lake in Mochau, which is a part of China, and she is drawn to the music. She's always drawn to the music on the edge of Crescent Lake in a yurt, which is, in fact, a venue. So I'm just going to read you. And she's stopped by a woman in a burqa who asks her if she has a ram's bladder condom, which she doesn't have on her. But she is now going to be the backing uzkumuzist at this gig in the yurt. I slunk to the back of the yurt. A quintet of swarthy men were tuning up in a billow of cannabis smoke. They haggled over the pitch, sucking their Mountain Dew, adjusting their vibrations with an alarming degree of leeway. "You flat, brew, lower, lower," said one, clutching a horse fiddle. "No, man, that is sharp," said another, winding a peg on a wooden camuse. "Up, no, down, no, up, that's it," said a third. It was going to take a miracle for them to play in concert pitch. "Excuse me, gents," I said. "The lady at the flap sent me backstage. I'm the backing iron kumuzist." "Have you got your own instrument?" asked the fiddler, eyeing my apricots. "I was hoping you had a spare," I said. "Well, we don't," said the lead kumuzist. "You'll have to contrive your own." I shook my head violently, and my hairpin escaped its nest of curls and fell to the floor. "How about this?" I bent one prong of the hairpin inwards and put the flat side against my lips, plucking the airy end. A dreamy boing buzzed into my brain. I struck again. The tone echoed inside my mouth cabin. I wobbled my lips around. The harp harpooned my senses. The instrument spoke in 900 tongues, jiggling around my head. Uzkumuz, Yiddle's harp, Wanda's wind. "Nothing to it," I said. "Good sow, my bitch," said the lead kumuzist. "Just hold the rhythm steady. I'll give you a sign when it's your turn for a solo." "No, about your repertoire." "Oh, we'll do a few Kui standards, the popular manas, and an ear or two, and there's just about time for another spliff before we go on." This I was happy to hear. Opium dulls my playing. Chasing the dragon gives me the heebie-jeebies. Cannabis is the King Solomon of drugs, the fairest of them all. We did justice to the stash. The yurtman needed a few more rehearsals, to put it mildly. Yirgal, the horse fiddler, was deaf as a puff adder and took his cues solely from the motions of Gulnara, the dubula player, who was obscured by a yurt pole, as a result of which I had to perform like a St. Vitus victim, counting him in so Yirgal could keep time. Cholpon, the sibigist, was an opium-addled lad who downed fermented silkworm cocktails and passed out before the third set. Talay was the second kumuzist. He was grey of hair and long of tooth, but he could play the bejesus out of any tune, so long as it was in the key of C. And me, Uzkumuz oralist, filling in the endless choruses, keeping the beat rock steady, because nobody else knew what the fig was potting. Most folksy tunes consist of the same 5 notes, all rendered in common time. I wasn't familiar with their oeuvre, but I caught on fast. There was no set list and no warning. The yurtmen just called each song as they went along. Love yurts. There's a yurt in my bucket. Do you really want to yurt me? Yurts like heaven. The patrons, knocking back camel piss and sake, became rowdier as the set progressed, calling out encores that were already played. At a prearranged yet unspoken moment, each musician downed a shooter and took his turn at the wheel, letting the others hold the structure as best they could as he stepped into the moonlight, which shone through the hole at the top of the yurt. Then they played Psalm 13, traditional style, in deep kirks, the one where David begs for the Lord to remember him. I wasn't too fond of the mawkish lyrics. If Yahweh wants to stop hucking for a secunda, give him a break. After a few more standards, I motioned to Talay to see if he'd let me take a solo on Yurt So Bad. He nodded. The others fell in line. I took to my uzkumuz and jammed. "Bring it on, baby," said Gulnara, quickening the beat of his dobula. The audience went meshuggah at my first improvisation. The yurtman gave me another round. I couldn't remember exactly what I'd done the first time, so the second chorus had a whole new feeling. There was no stopping me. I swooped and I dove, puffed my cheeks out a little, then a lot, and the hairpin echoed around the yurt, snaking through the crowd with its rounded lamophone tones. I could see Cholpon out of the corner of my eye, bringing a forefinger to his jowly neck and drawing it across his throat. Did he mean for me to desist? I was just getting started. The crowd was throwing latkes at the bandstand, a clattering of soms and yend and cowries. I altered my lips and changed the beat, surreptitiously picking up the tossed coinage. Now I was fully in control, and the yurtman didn't like it. The audience was becoming more obnoxious, shouting out requests, urging me to get my chrysalis off. With all that tumult, it was almost impossible for me to hear myself zing. As the yurtman tacited as one, I stepped to the front of the tiny stage and bellowed over the maddening crowd, "Will you all shut the fig up?" A deathly hush ensued. The audience muttered and spluttered as they cleared the yurt, demanding their money back from the management. I'd clearly blown it. "You've destroyed our gig," Talay snapped. "We'll never be allowed back." "They were yelling over the music," I sulked. "These kirks have got no artistic appreciation." "Well, you're going to have to compensate all of us," said the second commusist. "Divvy up the takings." Nearly done. "Sorry, gents, all is fair in love and uzkumuz." I backed towards the yurt flap. "Just where do you think you're going, my lovely?" asked Jogel. "You're not getting away with upstaging us that easily." I heard the sickly unbuckling of a camel-skin girdle. "You can't just swan in here looking like a chrysanthemum in bloom," Cholpon snarled, blocking my exit. "The lady in black said you needed a backing iron commusist," I said. "Don't you want to add a touch of flair to the band?" "Shut up, Kopolok." Jogel backhanded me to the ground. "You've defiled the sanctity of this holy yurt." The men guffawed at my discomfort. "Holy?" I yelped through my pain. "It's practically a den of iniquity. And as for your state of undress, you have utterly disregarded the customs of this place. It's a pure silk petticoat. We are not permitted to see the flesh of the female." "Back off, Jurgel," I improvised. "I know people in high places." "Enough, whore." He hit me again, squarely on the jaw. "You have brought your ungodly ways into our sight. It's an abomination." I landed in a heap on the sawdust and pistachio crunch. The yurtmen hooted in concert as my yiddle's harp pierced my inner cheek and ripped through my lip. I tasted the bitterness of blood and iron. I could take them on individually, but they were behaving like a mob, and I could see I wasn't going to get the upper hand, let alone slip on a ram's bladder. I was hooked to the harp like a newly fished flounder. "Bend her over," Gulnara commanded.
Okay, that's a cliffhanger.
Well,
That's
do you want to know what happened next?
You'll have to buy the book. Sorry, you'll have to buy the book.
Okay, so you want me to do my second reading now?
Yes,
and
please.
It's my friend Merle's birthday today, and happy birthday, Merle. I know that Merle knows who this is, and remember that when you write, you always do kind of channel someone or something that's happened. So any of you who recognize this Solly the Sultan, shut up. In fact, shut the fig up. This is just to show you because she has agency. There's a lot of sexual activity that she takes the upper hand in, being a woman with agency. And Solly is actually Suleiman the Great, who she knew very well back in the day, 1555 AD, which is slightly out of historical context. And Solly the Sultan and Wanda get together. I'll make this a slightly shorter piece. Merle, don't speak. Solly the Sultan lay sideways on the embroidered bedspread, slack belly glistening in the lamplight, varicose veins poulticed by the tight woolen stockings I had smuggled into the seraglio. Around us lay the detritus of lovemaking, discarded dildos, dribbled wineskins, the lap of luxury in fabulous disarray. Sol held the key to the kingdom between his legs, his harem, his forbidden city of clitties, his pride and his shame combined. "How did you do that?" he puffed. "Magical powers," I smiled. "It's all the Christian babies we get to eat." Sol was a prem, but if you didn't know how to sing it just right while nibbling the big boy, you could rub him raw 10 ways of Ramadan, and relief would evade him. F was his scarlet letter. F for fellatio, his secret sin, in the key of F major. It took both Saz and Suck to give Sol his due. Unless they grasped this solid insight, the freshest female flesh would fail to rouse his scepter. If you've ever held a sultan by the short and curlies, you'll know the feeling. Emperors, presidents, rabbis, high priests, they're all seduced by the flattery of an intelligent woman playing them at their own game, their own power game. Tit for turban, so to speak. Things with Solly were going to be no different. I wanted some of that salty sultan action, but my eye was on two prizes: to locate and repossess the original Saz, and see where our lollipop girls had been sucked in. After I'd given him a second blowjob through his quilted robes, which took all of 12 seconds, a new record, Solly lit a cherry hookah, rolled on his back and babbled away in Ladino about Roxolana, his wayward chief concubine. He told me how he had been smitten on sight by the slave girl for sale in the marketplace, a Polish beauty not 15 years old, an utterly unravaged bride, and how she'd moistened her philtrum as he'd rode past atop his litter, and he'd instantly stiffened and asked for her. And they'd brought her to him, and he'd fallen into unfathomable longing, his soul on a glistening string of poisoned pearls. "She told me I'm a terrible lover," the Sultan said miserably. He rolled over for a slug from a wineskin, and one of his stockings snagged on a diamante rose. "Shame, Sol." I unpicked the thread. "How could she think such a thing?" "Every night after dinner, she'd down 2 bottles of barley vodka, and before I could mount her, her sleeping draught kicked in, and she'd snore like the dead until dawn." Perhaps it helped her block out the morning musuins. Musuins? "She told me my other paramours are lying." She couldn't possibly. "When I could rouse her from her slumber, I like to ride her in purdah position, you know, when she's on top and I'm on fire beneath. But my belly got in the way, and I kept slipping out, and she would never let me use the ivory dildo I bought her in Baghdad. What can a despot do? I had to finish myself off in the antechamber with so saucy miniatures, and it takes bloody ages." "It's a lugubrious game," I murmured. It does go on and on. I'm just going to go to the next part, because kind of the crux of the whole story is here. Look, Sol, let's cut to the chase. Some girl chicks aren't that big into fellatio. You'll have to groom her. I popped a grape into his wine-dark mouth and played a mournful accompaniment to his tribulation. "Am I a bad lay, Wanda?" "You're an exciting man, Sol." "No, but as a lover." "Look, Sol, it's not just about you." He stopped me mid-sentence with a scowl. "I beg your pardon, Odalisque, watch your step. I can have you beheaded right here on the spot for insolence." "Calm down, Solly," I said. "Look, beheading or not, I'm sorry to have to break this to you. Sometimes a woman must take responsibility for her own pleasure. You know, it's not just about what's between your legs." The Sultan was working up to a serious sulk. He reached for the tasseled bell pull to call the bellhop, but I was compelled to continue. "Never knows when to shut up," I hear Irata's voice. "Just hear me out, Sol," I said. "A woman should be so excited just by being in your presence that she could climax on this very Saz." And to illustrate, I leapt up and straddled the belly of the instrument, rubbing myself against its long, narrow neck. "Get off that," Sol snapped. "You could give yourself an injury." "I'm just making my point here, Sol. My Boba could bring herself to ecstasy just by glancing at my Zeta. Through her veil, across a crowded temple. And when they danced, well, the very walls wailed." "How did he do it?" Solly asked, toying with the tassel. "He found her B-spot." "B-spot?" "B-spot, Sol. B for Bathsheba, for that was her name. Her bobbiness, her beauty spot, her key of B, her bottom line. My grandfather discovered that she could pleasure herself by her own command, using nothing but her imagination and his gaze. It brought forth secrets no veil could disguise." "But I command the Ottoman state. I am entitled. Granted, Sol, but you can't command your lady's lust. You mean I must do things to please her? Bravo, Sol. Now you get it. You need to turn her on. You're powerless for once in your life. No names mentioned.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, so I have some ideas that I'm just going to throw out. Let's see how you respond. One sort of connected to two words that connect and that relate to the book that you've written. Picaresque and storytelling.
Okay. As you know, I did a master's, which was sort of an academic approach to the actual storytelling itself. We had to do a proposal, we had to write the work, and then we had to write a reflexive. So, and because I was in a room with very many, very clever academics, including Ivan Vladislavich and Michel Adler and Bronwyn and all of them, I kind of channeled the idea of writing memoir, which turned into a character who became Wanda. And at some point, Ivan Vladislavich said to me, after handing in a few of the pieces, "Oh, so you're writing a picaresque?" And I said, "Oh, am I?" And I went and looked it up, and sure enough, I had channeled unconsciously. It's a pre-novel form that comes out of the Spanish Golden Age, which was written by converso Jews, incidentally, that talks about a sort of an ordinary person who goes through experiences satirizing the society from which they come, which was, in fact, what I've done. This is not a South African book, but it all kind of links back to the satirical aspect of a society that is prejudiced against women, against Jews, against whomever. So the storytelling is the main point of all of it, is to hook somebody with a tale. But the picaresque was how Wanda began. She had no particular agenda. She never really learned or grew, which is the difference between the picaresque and the novel form, which you well know, Sean. And
Just tell them.
And so what I had to do was take the picaresque, which then for the MA, I was absolutely married to the idea that this was a picaresque novel and she couldn't grow, she couldn't transform. It was kind of like Groundhog Day over and over. And after the MA, when I worked with the inimitable Alison Lowry to transform it into a publishable book, I had to take her into kind of the modern or the almost postmodern age so that she could have a sense of transformation, because any novelist, anybody can tell you, has to have some form of her hero's journey, if you like. It's a satire of the heroine's journey. Mm-hmm. But she had to have some form of transcendence, which had to then be sort of teased through the entire book. So she still is a picarer, but she's a postmodern picarer, telling her story, which of course is what it's all about.
Mm-hmm. Right, great. So the picaro or the picara is a sort of, in the traditional literature, is like a rogue.
Yes.
It's like a sort of a wandering person, yes. Someone who gets into a lot of trouble, gets into and out of different scrapes, that sort of thing, right?
Yes. A person of low character, in fact.
Yes, yes. But I think subsequently that model has been used in different ways that turn that character into almost like a sort of a trickster or
yes, she is a trickster.
Someone who's in a series of discoveries in a way, or a series of interventions or something, which is what I think you do in
So, and I must just
book.
say to you that Lazarillo de Tormes, which was one of the original picaresque novels, when I realized I was writing picaresque, it was quite a thrill, because I had a kind of skeleton structure to work on. And Lazarillo de Tormes was almost the first picaresque book ever written by a man, I presume. So she became Wanda B Lazarus, which was kind of referencing the Lazarillo de Tormes, and also, of course, Lazarus from the Bible, and she became Lazarus' sister as a high satire.
Because also she kind of gets reborn over time.
Well, she's accidentally cursed with immortality.
Right.
If you read the book, you'll see how that happened. And so she herself is quite surprised to find that she's dead again or alive again. And that was kind of the glyph that I was able to bring her through these periods of history to the present day, because every time she gets hanged, stabbed, poisoned. I've kind of found a whole bunch of ways that you can kill a person. And that, of course, makes death satirical, which, of course, is a dangerous thing, but actually it really is the lightest touch. And also referencing the Jewish form of what death is, which is a Sheol state that nobody really knows about. But the pleroma is almost a Jungian state of kind of interstitial space, where the muses of antiquity, who nobody can rattle off except Dimitri, task her to return each time to an earthly realm. So the earthly realm is written in the sort of past tense storytelling, and the pleroma is written in a present tense with these 9 bitches, who basically are a bunch of mean girls who don't really care whether she dies or lives.
Right.
So it's kind of magic realism meets picaresque meets bad hair day for about 2,000 years. But yes, it's...
Okay, cool. Next idea. Sex.
Now.
Perhaps I could have a drink first.
Anyone for sex? Just sex. Okay, so...
Well, there's a lot of sex in the book,
There's
as
a
you
lot.
said.
She-
She's a
you
very
know-
sexual being. She seduces people. She
No. And she did it. You see, the wonderful thing about creating a character is that she did it. There's a whole thing, and I mean, you're a man, and there are men here, and I'm not just speaking about every woman, but sex is agency. And so many of us, can I do a Sharon Stone now? So many of the females, be a good girl, keep your legs closed, smile, don't laugh too loud, all the lady things that we're told to do, are countered by the idea that a woman has sexual agency. And so she did. And in fact, my first chapter, where she is assaulted in the Holy of Holies, she fights back. And in fact, she gets, if you like, the better of the man who wanted to seduce her Me Too moment, if you like. And then she started having sex. You know, I would go to my MA class, like, not more sex, Lynn. I can't write another sex scene. But yet, there was something about her agency as a woman in the world that allowed her, that she allowed me to allow her to experience. So you know, in the book, I use sort of euphemisms for her private bits. She calls it her pomegranate, and her tits are her apricots, and her bum are her peaches. So you can say the most outrageous things by using these euphemisms, and the F word is a fig now. So there's a kind of delicious kind of sensuality about her sexuality. And she stoops herself through 2,000 years. She never gets pregnant, which would be for you. It's very
good
difficult.
description of the book. Yeah.
Very difficult to carry a baby through time traveling, as I discovered. So she put that
She
down.
could have dropped it off in the pleroma.
That's a very good interquel. Let's do it. So yes, so it's sexually charged, but the sex is in itself a metaphor for her agency. And I think that at one point, in fact, the piece I read you just now, the cliffhanger, was that I wanted her to be gang raped. And when I went to my class, I went, no, she can't be raped. She cannot be raped. Don't let her be raped. And which was quite interesting, because the audience said, no, don't let that happen to her. So in a way, she always escapes the absolute nastiness of the men and women, because she does swing both ways. And she does actually dress up as a man, dressed as a woman, as a man. There's a lot of sexual fluidity, one could say, in her experience, which once again is the feminine or the female or the human experiencing life from the other side, so to speak. I do enjoy that Etty, who is a painter in the 18th century, really fancies Wanda, but Wanda's dressed up as Felix Mendelssohn. So he actually fancies a girl who's in fact a boy, and I have been to parties as a girl dressed as a boy, dressed as a girl. I like that fluidity, if you're not doing anything later.
I don't know. I don't have my
enjoy that
suitcase of clothes.
Pardon?
I don't have enough clothes.
I've got a spare in the dressing room. So yes, her sexuality is a metaphor for her agency, her fluidity, and her sovereignty over herself.
Okay, cool. Makes sense. Okay, next one. Sort of relates to the first one, but goes in a bit of a different direction. History/mythology.
God. So, for those of you who don't know, the Wandering Jew, my premise was always, what if the Wandering Jew was a woman? And not just any woman, sexually charged, foul-mouthed, freewheeling, etc. The reason I found it academically or almost intellectually very interesting, that it's an anti-Semitic glyph created in the Middle Ages by a monk called Roger of Wendover, a.k.a. Bendover, who is in the book, who had heard a rumor of this eternal, hook-nosed, smelly outcast who wandered about and never died. But it was written by men about a male. So as feminist as I seem to have outed myself as being, what if that wandering Jew was a female person? And what if a female person wrote about that myth and changed it? Because anti-Semitism, as I have experienced it in my early childhood, and I've experienced in McDonald's of all places. So in the fact that I'm a Jewish, white, middle-class South African who came here at 14 and was told, you're Jewish, you're white, you're a woman, which is very distressing at the time, is to have looked at a myth that goes back, and then they rear-engineered it into the Bible. They justified it as having come out of the Bible, because we must be very quiet in the Bible here. We must not do any Sharon Stones in that respect. So I wanted to explore the myth of the wandering Jew, and then, in a sense, in a way, the myth of Wanda B Lazarus then becomes kind of tied in with that, because it's never, I hope I'm not didactic or preachy about any of this, but Wanda has her say in a lot of circumstances where women aren't allowed, women are get to the back, women are dressed as men in order to survive. Don't travel through the Middle Ages dressed as a woman, just a tip. Use beards, use disguises, so she uses her wiles in a mythological way to undermine, if you like, the wandering Jew myth, which in turn has brought me into my Jewishness, which I don't go as in everyday life, but it's actually brought me back to my historical and mythical roots as a channeler of the Jewish story, Wanda's way. This is not a history of the Jews, and it's not for the ultra-Orthodox, I don't think. I would love to speak to him. In fact, if you were an Orthodox rabbi, we could have a conversation.
Well, I'm afraid I cannot oblige
Not.
in that respect.
So yes, so I took the myth. You know, people say that we all write our own myth. At some point, we all have our own myth. And so perhaps this is me channeling my myth into an ahistorical character who takes up the cudgels of this smelly, hook-nosed outcast, which she disguises herself for about 300 years in order to go on her travels. So if that answers your question, it's a mythological, it's a mythic story about changing the concept of the myth of the wandering Jew outcast.
And you use that, the mythology, as you say, the classical Greek idea of, that there are 9 muses that govern these various areas of, human creative activity. They exist in this timeless realm that you call the pleroma. And she sort of is elevated to that realm between travels through history. So it's just interesting to me that you have a sort of a mythological structure in a way, but you drag her through history, through actual, history when, either when it's, Stradivarius is making a violin, that moment in history she pops up, or, other moments.
It's very insightful, because in the pleromic realm it's timeless, as you say, and mythological, but in the chapters it's very time-bound, because I didn't want to talk about swathes of history. So it's like a week in Cremona, 2 weeks or even a few hours. She kind of pops in and out. So the mythical structure of the muses and the Jewish story is a little bit of a paradox, but that was quite fun to play with as well.
Yeah, it's a very interesting and unusual, I think, structure for a novel, for a way to tell a story.
Apparently
and
it has no genre. You'll find it in children's activity books and in the religion section.
Yes.
Don't read it to your children.
Religious studies.
It was actually in religious studies at a point, and in fact Simone said to me some people actually look for it in the religion section, which is very frightening.
Right.
But,
Well, that's
each to his own.
I'm sure it will be very educational.
Stephen was very happy.
Okay, then the last idea, that I thought, and this could go a long way. Music.
Oh, God. You're the first person to ask me about it, and it's so. I came out of the womb singing Shalom Aleichem as such. I have a stage mother, a stage father, and I could probably sing before I could talk, to exaggerate a fact. I have, in a sense, been musically engaged all my life. Here's my ex-manager in the audience. But I think I just want to say, I think I'm probably a better writer than a musician, because being a musician in South Africa has been a journey, but I couldn't have written this book without that journey. Always being the only woman in the band, mostly being the only white person in the band, which was also a very interesting cultural thing. But then I went back, you know who Johnny Faree, the late great Johnny Faree, after I did my jazz show on TV in 2001, Claire Loves that day said to me, "You should really go and learn music now, Lynn." She didn't say it in that accent. And I went to Johnny at the age of 40 and started to learn jazz music. And in fact, Wanda herself is illiterate until about the Middle Ages, where she learns how to illuminate. I was an illiterate musician. I would just get up in front of kippies in a pink bridesmaid's outfit and sing Summertime, and I did, with the likes of Hugh Masekela and Surendran Reddy. I really did that. I had no shame, I had no pride. I was just into the band like Gulnara and the boys. So in a way, and also because I'm of quite advanced years, I couldn't have written this book had I not had that life experience. Playing in the Catskills, Ebony and Ivory in New York State. The Gulnara, which was actually the Tavern 252 back in the 90s. And because I went from almost musical illiteracy, like kind of just the gift, to absolute study, chord charts, thirds and flat 19ths and all of that stuff, is that I actually educated myself. I grew my musical brain until I could, what they call comp. It took me a very long time to be able to play and sing. Oh my God, I'm singing, I'm playing. Yet, it couldn't be a profession for me. It's earning a living as a musician is, you know, I can't live on 500 Rand playing at the Hilton Hotel with Mike Mchalamela. I have, but it doesn't pay the rent. And because of being a copywriter, so I went in, but I write jingles. I'm always doing the backing vocals for my jingles, and then they remove me and really replace me with real singers. So my music, I can't say that, you must say this, that the book has a kind of musical tone because I think I write in a very rhythmic, in a musical way, hey, because of my musical background. But I think that I hope that I'm a better writer than I ever was a musician. And it also, here's a nice little anecdote. Sipho Mtiane phoned me. And I was in a band, I was in lots and lots and lots of bands back in the Yeovil days where we would smoke a potato pipe of tune up for 10 hours and you know, play for 20 Rand round the corner. And Sipho called me and said, "My sister, you're back. I'd love to get together. Come to the studio." I said, "Sips, music is collaborative art. It has to be a collaborative art. There's got to be, you know, more than just you and your instrument. But writing is a solo art. Writing is a private art, despite the university and the editors and everyone else." And I think for my mature process, for my maturation of my creativity, I had to sit down, lose the FOMO, and sit down at the typewriter and bleed. And I think that's the huge difference between my musicality, which I can do on my own, and the writing, is that I want to call it, it's not a higher art, it's informed by the musicality, but words on a page are different from the etherealness of, I hope that I've captured a sense of music in the book. Is that why you asked?
Well, I think I asked because, you know, as you say, that there's a musicality in the writing, but I think music in and of itself is a strong theme in the book. I mean, she's moving through time. She's been speaking to the muses, one of whom is obviously the muse of music, is where we get the word from. You know, apart from the muse of history, Cleo and all the rest of them, you know, she's seeking different musical instruments. In a way, there's a whole history of musical instrumentation embedded in the book. You know, there's different instruments she's playing. What is she playing in the yurt and oud or something?
She plays the uzkumuz. She plays in fact, in each chapter, it's quite important to say that Wanda wants to be the 10th muse. That's her goal. I didn't put it into the MA.
Yeah, I didn't want to say that because I thought it might be a spoiler.
Okay,
but
it's a spoiler alert. She wants to be the 10th muse. It wasn't in the MA, but I put it because I thought it was a bit twee. At first, and then I put it in because she had to have something. What does she want or need, etc. So in each chapter, when each muse says, "Oh, go and get me a commus, go and get me a saz," and because how many musical instruments? There are millions. So I stuck to string instruments, which is, I play the guitar-ish. So she goes from the four-minx, which is what she discovers through Carter, her first love. Four-minx is a lot sexier than a shofar, let me tell you that. And then she moves to the ektar, which is the Indian one-string, the komuz, the jazz guitar, the oud, the saz itself, the commedia in Cremona. So I used a lot of artistic glyphs, but she is, in a sense, always a big balalaika from Razzie. And then eventually, well, I'm not going to spoiler alert you, she, in the final chapter, creates her own instrument, which, you know, metaphor. The whole book is, in a sense, a metaphor of music, which I only discovered after I'd written it. So she's always in pursuit. The pipa strings of Macau, which are made from pupae, and she meets the princess with the rotten feet. So in each chapter, and in fact, Terpsichore's plectrum, which is called a plectron, I believe, in Greek. She goes to where the plectron was taken by the British and put into Queen Victoria's care, and that's why she goes to the garden party at Victoria's palace to retrieve Terpsichore's plectrum, which she happened to drop in 33 AD into the cement of some tesserae palace. So yes, it's actually a huge theme, and it is the lightness of the theme, because wherever she goes, she sings, she harmonizes in the Middle Ages, which was forbidden because it was the note of the devil, and gets into a lot of trouble. She has to leave after putzkering with the cucumbers. She actually has to go. So in each one, the instrument is kind of a challenge to her and a despair. So it's a very double-edged kitara as such.
And I think it's part of the quest, because we were talking about the picaresque and the hero/heroine narrative. These are very ancient forms of, you know, storytelling, but they're always they're very often looking for something. There's got to be a sort of something, you know, something that means something they've got to achieve, they've got to look for. I mean, it's like, you know, the role-playing games now. You know, there's always got to be a MacGuffin. There's got to be you've got to get the Dragon Balls or whatever, you know.
Oh, Dragon Balls. That's a new one.
That's a TV series for kids.
Dragon Balls.
Dragon Ball Z.
It's called Dragon Balls.
It's called Dragon
How
Ball
rude.
Z.
Okay.
Oh, come on, even I know that. I'm ancient.
But what's lovely about that is to infuse the music, because you can see it as a story, you can see it as a very academic kind of exploration of the Jewish question. You can also just read it as a very enjoyable, anecdotal, episodic romp, which I hope, so one can read it with the lightest touch. Whenever I got too heavy, the music would lighten it. The music would always lighten it, even though music was actually, should I read a tiny little bit about the music? Because I think that it's interesting. And of course this comes from my childhood, because I had music shoved down my throat as a child, which actually led me to be very not musically, you know, we got schlepped out of bed in the middle of the night to play for the visitors, etc., etc. So we did. My sister will attest. So let me just, shall I read a small piece about that? Because I think it might, oh God, said she. Okay, pause. How's our time doing?
We got plenty.
Oh, we got plenty, and then people can ask things. Here it is. So I told you that I decided that Wanda was the sister of Lazzie, who was the guy that got raised from the dead by Jesus. And she is in the time of Jesus, and she actually helps him when he gets his 39 lashes, but that's just backstory. But I think that this this comes kind of from a very personal place, but yet fiction turns it into something kind of third person. I want to find the actual piece about... Talk amongst yourselves. Find, because there's a piece in particular that... Here we are. Okay, so there's two little sections. You want to hear? Do you want to hear it? Do you want? Don't stop yawning in the audience. Okay, lovely. Okay, so I think I should read this, because it's also the Jewishness, the music, and everything kind of tie in together. So Hadassah said I had perfect pitch from the moment I slithered from her womb that frosty Jerusalem morn. Where some bright infants mimic the modulations of their mother's tongue before they cut their first tooth. Mama, mama. My first spoken word was a mimesis of my mother's woe. Oi. It was Hadassah's go-to word for Tsoris. By the age of 8 months, I'd absorbed it from the milk of her honeyed bosom, and oi it was, and oi it would forever be. We've run out of matzah meal for the kanaitlach. Oi. Qumran is putting up the price of peaches. Oi, gewalt. Zara Bet-Bathia is pregnant with her 14th. Oy vey. The polysyllabic oy vavoy was uttered only in situations of vavavum, like during plagues and burnings, or when the temple was overrun by out-of-town tourists and we couldn't get our regular seats in the mixed front pews. Any inappropriate oys, and we had our mouths washed out with soapweed. But there was always a stash of oys for every occasion, and more vavoys were to come. The word defined our family in cacophonic cadences. Hadassah had a spontaneous song for every action. True story. This elicited a kind of musical Tourette's which has followed me all my lives. She had hairbrushing songs and putting on our sandals songs, Zimmer's gobbling songs and Canadlich munching songs, ditties to suckle by, tunes to tease by, lullabies to lullaby by, and all manner of nursery rhymes from Shalom Chavarim to Incy Wincy Schneider. It's for you, Ian. Up to the age of 3, I believed that Hadassah could conjure the spirit of experiences great and small with a song in her heart and the mantra of Oi. I was 5 when my mother appointed herself voice coach and stage mother to her trio of kids, and she never missed an opportunity to show off my pipes. We got used to being schlepped from dreamland in the middle of the night to be exhibited to inebriated visitors. By 10, I disentangled myself from my mother's musical meddling by singing off key and standing on Martha's toes in the choruses. I'd have rather died than admit that I missed the music, but I did. I tuned into my own inner medley, but even then, it was difficult to shut my mother out. It was worse in the temple. The raised tones of Hadassah's voice psalming out her obligatory god raves, people craning to see who the strident coloratura could be, made me cringe in Shemzach. Sometimes she even drowned out the shofar. My father, Theo, would stride out blaspheming, and Hadassah would be abandoned, spotlight by the Ner Tamid, oblivious to the rancid looks of the mixed congregation. All that stopped when we moved to Bethany, after Theo bolted and our first stepdaddy, Aziz, figged out. It was Qumran who started running the showbread. That's when the marks around Hadassah's throat turned red, purple, green, yellow, and Oy vey came out in a sodden and strangled key. He didn't like it when Hadassah sang. So I can kind of see there's the musicality, there's the torment of the feminine, there's the story of my life, but transformed into Wanda's words. Gives it a different sense to memoir. I didn't want to write the story of my life as such, but I feel quite exposed telling you all this now, because there is, those who know me will definitely know that who Hadassah is, and in fact Hadassah is the Hebrew for myrtle, which is my mother's name, but it isn't my mother. Mommy, it's not you.
But this is fiction writing, no?
Correct,
I mean,
correct.
You may start with a kernel of something
Yes, that's right.
in your life, in real life, an observation, but as it develops and as it grows, and as you say, Wanda kind of came to life, and then she took over.
She did.
And then she knew what journey she wanted to go on.
She still
She knew what
has.
she had to do, and off she went.
Can I tell everyone about the glyph?
Yes, do.
Which is quite important. So as I carried on writing and writing and writing, and she evolved to become Wanda, I found this was unearthed in about 2015. It's called the Gypsy Girl Mosaic of Gaziantep,
This is the little fragment of mosaic,
which
right?
is a fragment exactly as it is. And if you see, she has no mouth. And the moment that I saw her, I went, it's her. It's really her. And I mean, we got the copyright to put it on the book, but she is Wanda. And in fact, people say that she might even be a bloke, because you don't really know who she is and where she came from. And she's got it. They also call her the Middle Eastern Mona Lisa. She's less obviously well known, but I absolutely, and then she started to inspire me. Then they found actual mosaics of the muses themselves, which is now buried under some dam in Mesopotamia. But it was
I
very...
think we say Turkey nowadays.
We do say Turkey.
Or perhaps it's Iran or Iraq.
It's Iran. In fact, it's on the Iran-Iraq, Assyrian border.
Okay.
If any of you from Syria are watching, thank you so much. But it was very important to fictionalize. And like I said, I started writing memoir, but it did transform. But I think, as you say, the kernel is always there within the truth of one's sense of life, which is why I think the book does resonate. I have not been drowned in the Bosphorus. I have not been stabbed wearing a pubic hair beard in Russia, but I have slept in a car in Canada around the back seat in the middle of winter. So I've experienced aspects of this. My husband grew his beard after I wrote about Razzie, which is just important to note, because I've got a thing about beards. So in a way, it's a new. That's what's so exciting about the writing for me, is that it becomes a new thing, and then you read and go, oh, "Did I write that? It's not bad." This is going to sound terrible. My late dead, lovely dad, who can't read this because he's in heaven, said to me, "Am I in the book?" And I said, "Yes, Daddy, but I've given you a very small penis." Which is Anne Lamotte's advice, by the way. If anyone ever asks you, are they in the book, that's the stock response.
Right. Bit difficult if they're a woman.
I'll have to think about that. Yes,
I think so.
That we could take us on hold.
Okay, so that's fascinating. Anyone have any questions?
Does anyone want to ask
for Lynn?
She's going to wander.
Wander with the mic.
Oh, the
Put your
puns.
hands up. Don't be afraid.
Don't be shy. Philippa.
Lynn, I really think that this should become an audiobook because you read it so beautifully.
Well, it's funny you
just
should
like
mention.
to throw that idea out there.
Can I answer that?
Yes.
Oh, I planted her in the audience. I've been doing voiceovers for many, many decades. I think that my way of reading is an audio way. I hear things, it's oral. And in fact, so the husband said to me, the only way I'm going to read this book is if you read it to me. And I have started verbalizing the audio book. It turns out to be 18 hours of audio material. It's the most insane, intense, almost Sisyphean task to do. And
You're working on that. Yeah.
Yes. And Mr. Fry has actually given me some advice as to how to voice it. Slow, be very slow. Whenever I get too fast, I say Stephen Fry, Stephen Fry, Stephen Fry, to calm myself down.
Take a breath between paragraphs.
No, be slow. Don't show off too much, although there's a bit of accentery going on. And read it as if you're reading to one person. Don't read it to an audience, which then brings all sorts of clicks and voice notes and voice noises. So it will be an audiobook. It is taking time. It will be coming out. I'm not quite sure through which medium and mouthpiece, but yes, it will be an audiobook, and I implore you all to please buy it.
And you're going to give us the full 18 hours, are you?
Well, that's how long it takes. It actually takes, because that's how I timed for the reading today.
Right.
It takes about a minute to read 14 lines, so 140,000 words. I mean, a lot of books are longer than that. But it's an 18-hour. But wash the dishes, feed the dog, listen to it. You'll have to listen.
Sure.
And
I've listened to very, very few audiobooks in my life, and it's usually been when I've been sort of driving to Cape Town or something, and I listen to Brad Pitt reads The Crossing.
I asked Brad. He was busy.
He was busy. Yeah, he's a very busy man, particularly with all those post-divorce proceedings.
No, I know. I asked Angelina
900
as well.
children
She'll
and that
be
sort of thing.
Yeah. Look,
But it's nice to have the author reading it herself.
Well, I'm glad you say that because some people say, you must wait for Miriam Margolyes or Angelina Jolie, but I like reading the book. A lot of people who write, Jill, who say, put it in I can't look at this book again, I just can't. But I've had to look at the book again. And it's interesting in reading it, in verbalizing it, I kind of like it. Not in any vain way, but just almost as an object. I've read it so many times. It's like a very, very long proofread. To actually hear it resonate in the voice. There's a very long radio play that happens to be in book form.
Right. With a cast of thousands.
Thousands. But it's interesting because, for example, the high priest Caiaphas, I did in a Yiddish accent. And that was very funny, but actually it was funnier if I did it in a British accent.
Right.
Which is interesting because the Yiddish accent makes a lot of people cringe in Shemzach. But without, it's almost without personal judgment. It's as if I'm reading somebody else's book. I often look at Herlo, the husband, over the microphone and I say, is that funny? He said, yes, Lynn, it's funny. And then we carry on without a smile on our faces, because you have to read satire with a straight face. Never laugh at your own jokes, ever.
No, I wondered if you're talking about an 18-hour audiobook, and whether I thought you might going to say, well, I had to sort of trim it down. I had to.
It's untrimmable.
You know.
And I don't know you other authors, when you finally got the final format, in fact, Colleen said to me afterwards, have you edited it shorter? I said, no, I've edited it longer.
Is Colleen the publisher?
Colleen is our publisher from
Books.
Mojaji for the South African edition, and I edited with Alison Lowry, who's an absolute genius novel whisperer, goddess sent. But because when I'd finished the MA, the pleroma weren't, I knew I had to do another edit. I didn't know that I knew, but I knew. And so in order for the overarching narrative to actually be tight enough, I had to create personalities for every single muse, even if it was one line from them. Then it was exhausted to actually accent them so that they're not too show-offy, but you actually understand, because there is a lot of dialogue, which apparently is not done in a lot of literary fiction. For some reason, it's just too, it's been criticized for prior to its publication. But there is if you said to me, cut this book down by, I can't. Someone else might be able to chop it up. But even though it's quiptastic and eloquent and what's it called, logorrheic, a word I learned the other day, it's got a lot of logorrhea going on, is
that means a lot of words.
It's sort of like diarrhea.
Coming at you very fast.
But it has, she has to say everything she has to say. There's actually, it's a complete work. That sounds pretentious.
Yeah. Now I can imagine if you were told, look, you've got to bring this audio book in at
I can read it very fast.
10 hours. That it would be very difficult to.
I think that people who read audiobooks will read for as long as one reads. I've been reading all the Stephen Fry memoirs on audio to hear how to do it,
Yes.
And it's his books are also 12 hours. I mean, J.K. Rowling's books are about 39 million hours.
Millennia. They go on for millennia. Particularly the Goblet one.
I prefer to read because I read faster than I listen. But
Right.
it is, Philippa, for you, I make the book. Is anyone
I'm
else?
interested
Good.
in the title. Has it always been? Oh,
Microphone. We're on
We can hear
international
you.
television.
But we're on, yeah.
thank you. Thanks, Lynn. I'm interested in the title. Has it always been, or was it always? Why did you select that? And was it always the title?
Thanks for that, Dee. The MA working title was actually a portmanteau, which was called Nomadness, which was a portmanteau of nomad and madness, and it was very clever, and it had all little diacritics all over. And her original name was Wanda Lastelovsky, I think I called her, which was very over-obvious and but kind of contained her lustiness. And then I discovered the Lazarus, and when she became Wanda B Lazarus, it stuck. And when we published it, when we were considering what to call it, we took the Nomadness out because it's already a very long title. But it was always going to be a gospel. And the irony of her being a nice Jewish girl doing a gospel is why she's in the religion section. But and it's she became that, I would say, after about 4 to 6 months. Once I found the face, which was after about 8 months, and once I decided she was Wanda B Lazarus, she was nobody else. But she was for a while Lastelovsky. Thank God we changed it.
And remind us what the B stands for.
Oh, the B is but. So in Hebrew, and I don't speak fluent Yiddish.
Neither do I.
My brother thinks I do, and I don't. So there's a lot of, just to say, anachronistic words, and she speaks Yiddish at the beginning, which they didn't speak in 33 AD, but I wanted to have a kind of consistent character. It was the only consistent thing was her character through the ages. So, Bat Lazarus, it stands for Bat, which means daughter. So Ben is son, Bat is daughter. And it was a little pretension of hers to be Wanda B. So if those of you of a Hebraic persuasion knew what the B stood for Bat, although it's ironic because you would be Bat, she would be Bat Hadassah, she would be daughter of Hadassah, rather
go
than...
by the mother, not the father.
Well, it's all, yes, I think you'd have to speak to somebody a bit sort of more versed in these
Beth
things.
didn't.
But I would be Lynn but Hadassah, or Lynn but I don't, very much like the Norwegians do it, where the woman's named after the mother and the
Right.
father's the boy after the father. I think you can
Okay.
choose. But Lazarus, she was daughter of Lazarus, which is actually, in fact, sister of Lazarus. So it was
Right.
ironic. But I like the Wanda B, which she gets
It has
called
a
a
nice
lot.
ring
and
to it.
Just had a, I think sometimes you just know when the words just work. So she's Wanda B,
Right.
with a full stop after it.
Any other questions?
Mr. Said, take the mask off.
So as the saying goes, you don't have to be Jewish, but what if you don't understand half the words? What if you can't grasp half the
Michael,
concept?
shut up.
Again,
Okay, it's a very interesting question, and it's been asked of me often. The Yiddish is part of her word play, in the same way as pomegranate is, in the same way as Hebraic is French, in the same way that there's kolponon, kolopok, which is whore in deep kirks. If you get the sense of it, you get the idea of it. There is a glossary in the EPUB which is of great debatability, because if you in the fiction space, in the literary fiction space, you shouldn't have to be told. But you don't have to be Jewish. You don't even have to understand Yiddish. If you're a reader and you come across a word, maybe you're inspired to look it up. Maybe you can go to the back of the book. If we print it again, the publisher and my editor were adamant that there would not be a glossary. So I don't think it's a Jewish character, and I'm allowed to expropriate my own people. That's the one thing I am allowed to do. And so she can speak to Nandagopala, who is actually a converted Indian Jew, and a Chinese Jew, and a Sidonian Jew. And I actually don't like the word Jew in particular because it has a pejorative aspect. So I always call her a Yiddle. She's always a Yiddle. And in actual fact, somebody
less
asked me
pejorative.
why...
Less pejorative.
There's just something about Jew, and I think we can all... It prickles us. It prickles us, we Yiddles, and... to call someone, Jew me down and all this kind of... I didn't use any... I don't like it. I'm entitled not to like it. And I don't like Jewess either, personally. I find, like Lyness, Shawness. So it's actually... It is a challenge, and a lot of my non-religious Jewish friends have said, no, that's too much Yiddish. But the too much Yiddish also comes out of our own personal history, where we were also smelly hook-nosed wanderers who came here without a penny. And I'm kind of... referencing that as well. If it makes you feel uncomfortable, pass over it, don't read it. But of the people of a literary bent, I use the word advisedly, of the literary bent, it shouldn't defeat you, because all literature makes up words. Clockwork Orange is...
Yeah, exactly.
full
I
of
was
stuff.
going to mention Clockwork Orange because, there was he's made up a language,
Yes.
basically,
So in a
based
way,
on
yes.
Russian and English. So,
Yes.
And there was a huge debate when he published the book that he did not want a glossary in there. I think the American publishers made him put a glossary in.
You're right.
But he didn't want a glossary in there. And if you read it without a glossary, it begins to make sense. I mean, you
Correct.
do, in a sense, learn the language. And I think that the way that Lynn's used Yiddish... I mean, I'm familiar with a lot of Yiddish because I went to Hyde Park High School.
I love that.
Even though I'm, as someone said when I was approached in Rosebank once by somebody said, "Hello, we're from the Jews. I'm one of the Jews for Jesus." And I said, "Sorry, I'm one of the Goyim against God." But I do, what picks up a certain amount of Yiddish, it's just inevitable. And I think that it becomes part of the kind of experience of immersing yourself in the book in a way. You're challenged to look. I mean, if worst comes to worst, you can look it up on your phone. I mean, in many books that I sit there with a phone in one hand, looking things up. If it's an art book, I'm looking for the picture.
But don't you prefer to just read it?
But it's
and
nicer to just sort of
move
immerse
around,
yourself in it. If you don't get one line,
It's
then that's
immersion.
fine. You'll get the next line, and you sort of. So I think it works. I think it works to sort of, and it's also a little bit of a, as I think we discussed, because I was initially kind of taken aback, having read some of essentially like Paul Krivacek's great book, Yiddish civilization, and Shlomo Sand's great book, The Invention of the Jewish People, that Yiddish came into being in the 1800s.
Yes.
You know, so
In
to have
Israel.
her in the time of Christ, to give him his Greek Christian name, I thought you've got to call him Yoskapandre, right? That's to have her in 33 AD or
Yes.
CE or whatever we're calling it now, but speaking Yiddish is like a little bit of a sort of, it's
a
like watching a movie when there's a little bit of a glitch, but it helps you in a way to sort of, once you get over that, like in many, cases in literature, there's like a little something that bothers you, but just getting over it and getting used to it pulls you in.
Yes.
And it sort of sets the scene in a way I came to realize by the end of the first chapter or so, that in a way what it's doing is, this interpenetration of sort of different levels of history in a way.
Thank you for that.
And the sort of, in a way she isn't a kind of an archetype. I mean, I often disagree with that description in things, but because she's moving through history and back and forth and things anyway, in a way, she's kind of timeless.
Well,
so the fact that she's, got a lot of Yiddish in her vocabulary in 33 AD is, not really that surprising.
And also remember that I don't know when she's writing from, but if she's writing backwards, she could use, I didn't use that kind of language when I was 6, but if I was going to write about it, I might write about it from my present vernacular.
Yes.
But I like the idea that she is archetypal, is a bit sort of rich, but it is in a sense, she speaks about Beit Sim, which are balls. If the Beit Sim started to roll, well, what do you think the Beit Sim might have been?
Right.
So there is in a sense always, and I worked with Alison. I mean, each word was kind of wrought into its place. So the fact that you might not understand it. I had a friend who said to me, "What's a muse, Lynn?" And I said, "Well, I didn't say who it is, but if you don't know what a muse is, really go back and read Enid Blyton or something, because if you don't know what a muse is, I can't help you."
Yeah.
But if in other words, if you don't have a literary background of some kind of reading, I know I have friends here who have been defeated by the Yiddish, but don't be defeated. Rise through it. Clockwork Orange is also defeating, and it's interesting that some publishers say put a glossary and some say don't. But the reason that there shouldn't be a glossary is that I'm not going to put pomegranate, a euphemism for female genitalia, often plucked. I'm not.
No, if
going
you have to explain the joke, it's not a joke anymore.
No, correct. It's not even funny.
Question.
A novel note. Why does
Can you start again?
Why does the cover have a novel? Because it's novel. So
Because it's a novel.
yeah. So why?
Oh, why does it even have to say it?
Yes.
So one of my MA candidates said to me, "You misspelt novel." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Oh, this is just your life story, Lynn." I said, "Well, that's very flattering." Because without it, it looks like, a religious book. A lot of books actually say a novel, see it as first I wanted it to be a novel, but the reason that it says a novel is that without it, you might mistake it for a piece of Christian, self-help manual. So
I think that would be very valuable. I think you should retitle it.
If a priest walked in and said, "Oh, interesting, a Jewish take on Christianity," he might be a little shocked. So it needed to be called a novel in order to dog whistle it to be a work of fiction. Yeah, it's not a work of fact, even though every word is true. So it had to be dog whistled to be a novel, and I think it's probably correct.
I think in publishing terms, I mean, books have to kind of go into their category, otherwise who knows where to shelve the damn things, and what to put on the publicity material.
It's in the religion section, isn't it?
It is, but I mean, it's.
Yeah, so that's the main reason also to make absolutely certain that you don't think that this is a work of non-fiction. Because I've taken it as the gospel according to Mark or Matthew, and you read your gospel. It's
notable works of fiction, I might add.
They are. That's very funny. I've actually said somewhere, read your gospel, you'll believe one of them. But I'm not being anti-Christian or anti-Jewish or anti-religion in the sense of what has happened to women throughout all of our gospels. But you know, I don't know who this would be offensive to. I've got the Archbishop of Armenia naked in a confession booth, confessing to Wanda that he made up the story of the wandering Jew. And she then punishes him by putting a scold in his mouth. Now, I don't know if the Armenian See would be upset about something like that.
I should hope they are.
I hope they are. So I haven't done it to be blasphemous, so to speak, but I have done it to shake up. But satire can do that. You can say it with an absolute, the whole thing is ironic, I suppose. Serio-comic.
Yeah, I think that's a key thing, is that things are not taken deathly seriously. And if you take a sort of religious approach to writing, and you think you're writing some version of the Bible, then it's not going to be very entertaining.
No.
It
wasn't the intention.
I mean, if there's one thing one can say about the Gospel according to Wanda B Lazarus, it's entertaining.
Okay, see,
it's very
then
entertaining.
This becomes ironic in itself because it is the Gospel according to somebody who doesn't believe that the Gospel was true, which is why it's a novel, I think.
Right. It's a good explanation then. Stick to that story.
Are we out of time?
We've got a few more minutes. I would say about 10. So if there are any more questions, leading questions for
Anyone
Lynn?
want to lead? Come on, Ian, ask a question. I know you'll come up with something. I feel like we've been here for hours. Hours.
So it goes about the cover again.
Can you speak up, please?
Okay.
Speak up!
I can see that, like, the figure is ambiguous and there's mosaic. Why are there stars on the cover?
Oh, that's a very intimate question. Actually, in fact, the stars were part of the design. Carla Krieza designed the book, which it took a long time to get this simple. Oh, we had Dürer engravings, we went all the way, and then Alison said again, what was it about the face that you wanted, Lynn? So she had put 5 pointed stars, like a little asterisk on it, and I insisted that there were 6 points to the star, coming from the godless goy position. So it's almost, and in fact then, and this is even more pretentious, is that the section shifts inside the book. Sorry, I've written all over this because this is the audio book, so that each chapter has the star, and even in between, when they had put a 5-pointed asterisk, I insisted it was a 6-pointed asterisk. And in fact, they designed a little 6-pointed asterisk because
Some
it's
authors
a
are
sort
really
of little
picky.
yiddle dog whistle. It's a kind of stylized Mug and David, which is probably what we did with it, or Magin Davidim, as I believe they're called in the plural. But it is a good question. It was part of the kind of under design. You want to ask about that?
And you want to ask about that? Yes, your Stephen Fry quote. It's marvelous. I think a lot of people, a lot of authors would probably, commit
Kill.
mass murder to get a Stephen Fry quote on the front, particularly one saying, that this is a great book and
amazing.
filled with life and energy and joy. So
No, a novel filled, a novel charged.
Sorry, I paraphrase.
Well, that's how we met, because it was misspelt on
Indeed.
yes. Shall I tell the story?
If you go ahead.
So I hired, because one has to do a lot of marketing, whichever publisher you're with, and I had hired some people who will remain nameless, and I'm very grateful to them, who said, Lynn, you need an author page. So on this author page, I had quoted Sir Fry, and he had said, one of his things that he had said was, a Jewish Molly Bloom let loose in history, which is like, whoa. But the person who had written the post had spelled Bloom, B-L-U-M-E. And so this oak, I mean, nobody goes to an author page. I don't know what the point of an author page is, and I'd rather have my dogs than everything else on my Facebook. But anyway, I see this oak, and he goes, I'm sure Stephen Fry did not say Molly Bloom with that spelling. And I went, oh my goddess, what am I going to say? I contact him. I'm sort of vaguely.
Didn't I say maybe it was short for Molly Blumenthal?
But I was so embarrassed. And then, so I wrote to you and I said, and I took it off and I put it on, and then we were going to meet for coffee, and then I stood you up, and then I sent you flowers. So there was this whole tumult actually done from this one spelling mistake. But, which is a nice thing about social media, because we did connect that way. And then we went,
And you corrected the mistake.
oh,
I mean, look,
fired
I'm the
people.
last living person who actually read Ulysses by James Joyce. So, I mean, I'm the last person who can find the mistake, but, you know.
Look, it's wonderful to be recognized by somebody with that much influence. I have to become worthy of that influence in a way. I realize that it's an absolute gift from the gods, and he is my fairy godfather, and we have kept in contact, and he has helped me along with encouragement. It's just unbelievable. But I will rise to be worthy of that. It's not like instant fame, and here I am, you know, like,
Right.
when are we going on QI? You know, it's
Right.
not happening like that, but it gives me the courage and the encouragement to know that somehow out of my bubble, somebody so renowned thinks that Wanda's amazing. He's in love with Wanda. It's just, it's such a thrill. So are you a little bit. Flirting. But not yet. So yeah, and in fact, because of COVID and because the book took so long to come out, he responded to me. In fact, it's our anniversary next week,
Gosh.
and I was able to get it onto the cover, which is and onto the back
is great.
as well, which is
Yeah.
very, very special to me.
And hopefully that'll help sell books, because you
Bye,
want to
bye,
sell
bye.
books, get people out there.
Okay.
Everyone should know it's a highly entertaining book, a lot of fun.
Thank you.
And really, a very interesting reading experience. So
Thank you, Sean.
I hope that you all rush out and buy it immediately if you
It's
haven't already.
on sale in the
or
store.
you have your 4 copies that you've bought for yourself,
Christmas
and members of
presents,
your
Hanukkah
family.
presents.
Hanukkah, you say?
Well,
you give
Sukkot,
presents.
Shavuot. I mean, there's so many festivals. Just buy. Show
Get them
yourself.
all signed by Lynn. And I think we are now probably out of time. I didn't see a signal there, but we must be getting pretty damn close.
How's our time?
I don't know if there's a...
Oh, over. Okay, all right.
Nonsense.
Well, then we'll just edit it.
Nonsense.
We'll edit it out.
Okay.
Unless there's anything.
Okay.
May I just quickly
Yes.
say the postcards that are on your chairs are for you to have and hold. But if you want to write a question to Wanda, or what do you wonder, which is our little marketing line, leave a note and we'll collect them. And if you are buying, I'm not allowed to punt the book myself, right?
Of course
Okay,
you
so
are.
if you're buying today,
Jesus.
Simone
stopping
and
you?
Fonse, and thank you to them all, but you'll do the thanks, is that you will get a Wanda bag and a Wanda bookmark and a Wanda postcard, completely with our love and compliments, to be able to pack to send to a friend, or put in a Christmas stocking, or give to Miriam Margulies, or whoever you may come across, or to Molly Blumenthal.
Molly
My very
Blumenthal.
good friend,
Your
Molly.
good friend, Molly Blumenthal.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. That was a lot of fun. Thank you, Lynn. Who said you said the thanks? Thank you again.
And
Thanks to Lynn.
the signing thing. So Simone,
And you're going to sit and sign?
am I going to sign? What are we?
You can sit there. You
I'm
can sit
sitting
here.
right. In fact, bring
You can
me.
sit right
Are we
there.
off?
Yep.
Can I have some wine, please?